In this segment, I want to talk about police patrol, because that's what we see the cops doing most often. We see them riding around in their patrol cars in what seems like a random pattern. Uh, Police patrol, the traditional method for police patrol in the United States from its inception, even as far back as the watch and the ward and sheriffs, when it was done by foot or on a horse. Patrol is what cops do. They wander around. They wander around so that people can see them in an effort to prevent criminal behavior. They wander around in the hopes that that moving around and patrolling increases their odds of detecting and preventing crime. But we've moved beyond foot patrol and horse patrol, though we still have both of those things. If you go to New York City, you will see horse-mounted patrol officers. Many places where we've instituted community-oriented policing, you'll see police officers, they get out of their car and walk the neighborhood rather than riding around. In other places, you'll see police officers patrolling on bicycles, golf carts, even ATVs, mopeds. You've got, river cities next to rivers. You might have river patrol, where police officers patrol the rivers. In Texas, you might see that among the game wardens. You also have aircraft, helicopter, particularly large metropolitan police departments make fairly frequent use of helicopters to patrol areas for crime and to assist vehicle patrol officers who are on the ground. There are four primary functions of what we call routine patrol. And the first is preventative patrol. This is focused on maintaining a visible presence in the community. And the idea is that the more visible the police are, the less likely less likelihood there is of crime. The idea is that the mere presence of police officers will deter crime or prevent crime or disorderly conduct. The second primary function of routine patrol is calls for service, CFS. These are the emergency or 911 and non-emergency calls that citizens place to the police. It also might simply be a citizen on the side of the road flagging down a police officer and asking for help. Police officers spend a great deal of their time responding to calls for service, where someone calls, gets the attention of the police through the 911 system or the non-emergency system and says, hey, I need help. And police go and respond and see what they can do to help. I would place a note here about 911 because in modern America, 911 gets abused. It's an issue of, again, the police are our agency of last resort. And so anytime they need to get a hold of the police, they call 911. And we have forgotten as a society that the purpose of 911 is for emergencies. And that non-emergency contacts with the police should not go through the 911 system. They should go through a police non-emergency contact. For example, you come home from a 2-week vacation to find that your front door is wide open and all your valuables are missing. Most people's natural reaction is to call 911 and then get mad at the police when it takes them an hour and a half to get there. Well, the reality is, if you come home from a 2-week vacation and find that your home's been burglarized, that's not an emergency. It's probably an emergency to you, but it's not an emergency to the police, because the bad guy, the criminal, the person who burglarized your home, by the time you get home from vacation, he's long gone. And there's no danger to you. And so this would be more appropriate to call the police non-emergency number in a situation like that. 911 should be reserved for when you've been in a traffic accident, or you're the victim of a crime and the offender has either just left or he's still there. That's what 911 is for, because 911 is designed to get police as quickly as possible to the situations where they need to be right then. A crime in progress or a crime that's just happened, the police need to respond quickly. For a crime like a burglary that may have happened anytime in the last week or two, that's not an emergency. That's something that the police can roll out to when they have time or between emergency calls. Overuse of the 911 system, it reduces the efficiency of the 911 system. And so it's good that, maybe by your phone, of course, now we have cell phones, we don't have phones on the wall, we have phone lists on. It might be good to, put in your contacts in your phone the non-emergency number for your local police department and sheriff's department, so that if you need the police, but you don't need the police right now, you can call the non-emergency number. The third primary function of routine patrol involves officer-initiated contact. This occurs when officers see some sort of traffic infraction. You know, they see you run a stop sign, or they see you exceeding the speed limit, they pull you over. That's a function of routine patrol when they pull you over. Or when a police officer witnesses a misdemeanor or felony offense in progress, they stop and they initiate the contact. So it's a officer-initiated contact rather than a call for service, which is a citizen-initiated contact. Finally, there are administrative duties that go along with routine patrol. Let's take up, and you'll find those of you that are going to become police officers, you will find this takes up far too much of your time. Filling out patrol reports, filling out vehicle inspections, updating policy manuals, and all the paperwork that comes along with issuing citations and arrests. You will find that as a police officer, you will be doing a lot of paperwork. Now, there are some different other ways to look at patrol. Different ways that the police can respond to the public when it is in need, whether it is through an officer-initiated contact or a citizen-initiated contact. Some police strategies for patrol involve splitting patrol into two different groups, rather than just sending your officers on a shift out on routine patrol and tell them to conduct all four of those functions I just mentioned. Some officers will split those, where you have part of your patrol service that their whole job is to respond to calls for service, and they tend to be in one location, whether it's the police department or just sitting, a couple of cars sitting next to each other in a parking lot. They tend to stay stationary and wait for the dispatcher to notify them of a call for service, and then they go and respond. Whereas you have the other part of your patrol shift that actually conducts patrols and investigations and are running around looking and trying to prevent crime. The advantage of this type of split patrol is it allows officers to focus their attention, so that you have some of your police officers just focus on responding to the public when they need it, and another part of your patrol force that is focused on preventing crime and detecting crime and investigating crime. Now, this brings up the idea of splitting patrol like that gives me an opportunity to talk about the difference between proactive and reactive policing. Reactive policing is what we see most often. Reactive policing is when the police respond to a call for service. Someone calls 911, someone waves them down. That's reactive policing, because the police are reacting to a call for service. They're reacting to some citizen need. Reactive patrol tends to be routine and unstructured. It is driven solely by 911 activity. So, reactive policing is, the police officer is just going from one call for service to another, reacting to 911. Happens quite often in major metropolitan areas where the police are just responding to calls for service. They spend their whole shift doing that. It's one 911 call after another. In this case, not only does 911 calls drive police activity, but also police activity is driven by the dispatcher, who is taking in those calls, prioritizing them, and sending calls out on the radio to police officers. This is especially assisted by modern crime mapping systems. Police departments like Houston will have these huge electronic maps on a wall, and every patrol car is marked with a GPS chip. And so dispatchers can look up at the map, or look at the map on their little computer screen, depending on how their dispatch room is set up, see where patrol cars are every minute. And so if I get a 911 call to a particular address, I can quickly locate on the map where the closest patrol unit is to that, contact that particular patrol unit, and have them respond to that call. The emphasis also in reactive policing is solving crimes, and we need the police to do that. But reactive policing has its opposite, and that's proactive policing. Proactive policing involves seeking the solutions to crime before they occur. And so it's about preventing crime. It's proactive. It's preactive, maybe you could even say. Patrol in this case is very targeted. If I'm a police chief or a shift sergeant in a police department, and I've noticed in my area of responsibility, there's been a particular neighborhood that's been having problems with increased frequency of burglaries. I'm going to target my patrol to that area, increase my police presence in that area in hopes of catching or detecting the criminals in action. This type of patrol, rather than being directed by 911 and dispatch, is directed by crime patterns, to where the police patrol is targeted where they're needed. And so rather than dispatch driving what the police do and assigning police to areas, it's the record management and research division. It's the crime mapping guys that dictate what the police do. Here, rather than solving crime, the emphasis is on preventing crime. Now, as a citizen, I would say that, hey, I would rather have my police be proactive than reactive, but it is unrealistic in most jurisdictions to expect the police to be 100% proactive, because they do have to respond to calls for service. For my next time, we've talked about routine patrol, and I'd like to shift now to talking about targeted patrol. We talked about proactive policing and how that is targeted. Let me speak a little bit about targeted patrol. This is when the police target their resources to specific areas, specific times, or targets in order to deter crime. There are several varieties of targeted policing that you may experience as a police officer. These include directed patrol. This is where police officers are assigned to specific shifts or traffic directed patrols, where they're told to select a specific area and heavily patrol that area. The officers in those areas that are responsible for monitoring that specific location for crime and disorder by routinely patrolling that area and enforcing the law. There's also aggressive patrol. This is where the police use the law to aggressively target known crime areas. So this is like the Las Vegas Police Department combating illegal prostitution in Las Vegas, where LVPD will take a particular area that is known to be frequented by prostitutes, will specifically look for prostitutes and johns to arrest, and they'll target that and aggressively target people violating those laws. Third type of targeted patrol is saturation patrol. Now, this is rather than having only one officer or a few officers deal with a specific location, the police officer would deploy multiple officers into an area. So we're going to saturate the area with police officers to increase the odds of preventing crime or detecting crime. Now, what that often ends up doing is the criminals just kind of move somewhere else. Our final variety of targeted patrol is zero tolerance. Well, that's not our final, excuse me. Mea culpa. Another version of targeted patrol is zero tolerance policing. This is called like a police crackdown. Zero tolerance policing says that the police should spend time and they focus on minor infractions. And so they're going to try to take care of all the little minor stuff, the public nuisance stuff, in the hopes that cleaning that up will reduce overall crime rates. One of the ways this was accomplished in places like New York was through a practice known as stop and frisk. And stop and frisk as a practice has gotten a really bad rap over the years, thanks to the New York Police Department. But it comes out of a Supreme Court case called Terry versus Ohio, decided in 1968, where the Supreme Court gave the police the authority to search someone based on reasonable suspicion. Remember, the Fourth Amendment says that searches and seizures have to be based on probable cause. And you should remember from earlier units that reasonable suspicion is a lower level of proof. Now, why would the Supreme Court then give the police the authority to search somebody with less than probable cause, with reasonable suspicion? Well, the idea behind the decision was based on officer safety. And the idea is that that to allow police officers who have a reasonable suspicion that someone they're dealing with is armed and dangerous to the officer, to give them an opportunity to search that person for weapons or other items that might be danger to the police officer. A Terry stop, as that is known, or a Terry search, excuse me, as that is known, only involves a brief pat down of someone's outer clothing with the explicit purpose of searching for weapons. In fact, as an example, if I'm conducting a Terry search, and we'll hit this again in another unit, but if I'm a police officer and I'm dealing with a suspect and I can build some sort of reasonable suspicion, and again, reasonable suspicion, I have to be able to articulate to a judge, I have to be able to explain to a judge why I felt that I was in danger and this person had a weapon. I could then pat down the outer clothing of the individual. I can't go through his wallet. I can't go into his pockets. I can't, if someone's got a backpack or a purse, I can't go into that container because I can just put that off to the side and out of the suspect's reach. All it is, I can pat them down. And I can only pat them down for things that feel like a weapon. So I'm doing a pat down and I feel a gun. I can temporarily seize that firearm for my safety as an officer. If during the Terry search, I feel something, I don't know, it's kind of crinkly and it's a little squishy, and I'm thinking, that really feels like it's a baggie of pot or some crack rocks. I cannot, during a Terry search, then go into the pocket and seize that item. The only time I can actually go into a pocket or inside a suspect's clothing at that point is if I can articulate to a judge, again, I think that's a weapon. And a little baggie of pot, there's no way that feels like a weapon. I would then have to, as a police officer, actually develop probable cause to search that individual. And if I can't develop probable cause, and my Terry search is a little shaky as to whether that could be part of the probable cause. And we'll talk about that more when you take criminal procedure. But remember, it has to be a weapon. It's the only thing I can look for. This has been abused. This was abused for quite a while by the New York Police Department that used Terry versus Ohio to, just stop people randomly and say, oh, this person looked like they had a weapon, and then search them, and then use that search to develop probable cause to do other things, to identify them, to do warrant searches. And a lot of the time, the stop and frisk, we found that more often than not, it was a person of color that was being stopped and searched, and the NYPD got into a whole lot of trouble over it, and they do not practice stop and frisk anymore, even though the initial foundation of the stop and frisk is a good thing based solely designed to improve officer safety. Let's see, other types of targeted patrol include tactical patrol, where you have a group of police officers conduct routine patrols and respond to 911 calls, while the tactical patrol is freed from calls for service and to target problem locations through multiple means. So you have like a special team that's going to target a particular crime type or area. You have speaking of particular areas, you have hotspot policing. This is emphasis is more on geography than crime. So the crime mapping guys develop, find a geographic area. Say, hey, crime's kind of concentrated in this area. It might be a city block, it might be a building, it might be a cluster of homes, and the police are going to emphasize patrol in that area to try to solve whatever the problem in that area is. You've also got what's called crime-specific policing. This focuses, again, primarily on a geographic location, but you're combining patrol for a geographic location with looking for a specific crime type. So again, I'm a watch sergeant, and I see that the crime mapping folks tell me that there's been a rash of burglaries in this 2-block radius, and so I'm going to assign some multiple officers to that 2-block radius and say, okay, go look for burglars, go catch me a burglar, and that's going to be their job. The last thing I want to talk about in this segment is something called the broken windows theory, because it's related to patrol, and it's related to police activity. Broken windows theory is the brainchild of a man named James Q. Wilson, who co-authored a paper with George Kellen. Both individuals were involved with the New York Police Department. And Wilson himself was a political scientist. He was actively involved in crime policy research and had actually served in President Lyndon Johnson's Commission on Crime and the Administration of Justice. He worked with former NYPD police chief George Kelling on developing what he called broken windows theory, which evolved into the broken windows model of policing and has contributed greatly to changes in American policing. Wilson and Kelling argued that each neighborhood is different. Each neighborhood has its own characteristics, but each neighborhood dealt individually with two problems: crime itself and the fear of crime, which is one of the reasons why we have a lot of fear of crime research out there. The idea is that if a home has a broken window, and here was their kind of blanket statement. They said if a home has a broken window and that window if a home has a broken window, and that window doesn't get fixed, it sends a signal not only to criminals, but to everyone else that no one cares about the neighborhood. But it also tells the people who live there, nobody cares. If no one cares and the window never gets fixed, it creates a sense of fear in the community and invites criminal behavior. Because the idea for the criminal is, okay, if no one cares about repairing the problems in this neighborhood, then no one will care if I sell drugs in this neighborhood or commit other crimes in the neighborhood. What the broken windows model of policing led to was an emphasis on minor crimes, was on fixing windows, was encouraging citizens to mow their lawn and to maintain the upkeep in their area. This model of policing, this theory, broken windows theory, led to a lot of homeowners association rules. If you own a home in particular neighborhoods that have a homeowners association, they tend to have rules. You got to sign on to them before you're allowed to buy a house in that neighborhood. And a lot of those rules have to do with, not, keeping your lawn maintained and, keeping the appearance of your property kept up and, not having, the car up on blocks in the front yard. And all of those things are based on this broken windows idea that if the neighborhood looks like the people who live there care, then it creates challenges for criminals. Whereas a neighborhood that looks broken down presents opportunity. In the next segment of the class, this unit, we will talk about community policing and problem-oriented policing, among other topics.